Last minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. Is okay with
And staying in front of the day isn't always
Nice,
as simple
Ryan.
as 1,
What's
2,
up?
3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
What's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to the Mindful Drinking Podcast with Derek Brown on the NASM Podcast Network.
Welcome to Mindful Drinking Podcast, where we talk about tips and information that you can use to be more mindful in your drinking. I'm your host, Derek Brown, and I want to start by telling you that I have spent a lot of time studying alcohol. I have received all kinds of certifications from being a sommelier, from studying just spirits and cocktails, and I've been at this for a long time. I've written 2 books. One's in the background, conveniently placed in the background. But I did not spend a lot of time thinking about beer because that wasn't really the drink that I enjoyed the most. I would try all kinds of beers, and I would learn about the different production techniques. That was important to me as a beverage specialist, as a beverage manager, as a bartender, but it wasn't really my favorite. So I usually drank whiskey or champagne or wine, and beer was kind of the in between drink. So maybe I would have like a nice, refreshing lager. And certainly if I went to like a baseball game, I'm not going to drink a Manhattan at a baseball game. That sounds crazy. So I would have a nice, crisp, usually American beer, make it real simple. So it was surprising to me that when I stopped drinking, I became a beer drinker, right? I stopped drinking alcohol, and this usual ritual that I had around drinking, maybe it was like an old fashioned or a glass of whiskey or a wine, was replaced now with non-alcoholic beer. And it became a very normal thing to me. To this day, I drink usually at night 1 or 2 non-alcoholic beers at the end of the night. And it's super satisfying, and it's very refreshing to me. And I'm going to explain a little bit why that is, not just for myself, but why it might be true for other people too. But I know that a lot of you you have that post-workout beer ritual. That's a big deal for a lot of athletes, and especially for runners and cyclists. And now that there's maybe some current concerns about the health effects of alcohol, a lot of athletes, even, just normal people who work out, are changing to non-alcoholic beer. And it sort of exploded in popularity, with brands sponsoring marathons and events. And I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it at your local grocery store. I'm sure you've seen it, of course, at these athletic events too. I mean, we even see it at the Olympics now. Last year Olympics, there was a non-alcoholic beer sponsor. But is non-alcoholic beer a healthy drink? Or, really what we're going to do is put it in the context of performance and athletic recovery. So let's break it down. I'm going to start by talking about the science of non-alcoholic beer for recovery. And I'm going to start by talking about the most obvious beneficial part of non-alcoholic beer. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the general ways that non-alcoholic beer might help performance and recovery. And then we will get into some of the more, questionable aspects of it. But let's start by saying the most obvious thing that non-alcoholic beer can do is hydration. Non-alcoholic beer hydrates as well as water. Please stop. I'm not telling you to replace your water with non-alcoholic beer. There was literally, I remember there was this blog back in the day where blogs were very popular, where this guy replaced all the things he used with water with beer, actual beer with alcohol. That means he brushed his teeth with beer. He made his ramen with beer, so forth. Very, very bad idea. very, very bad idea. So I'm not even suggesting that you replace your water with NA beer, but I'm just suggesting that it does hydrate as well. It is water. And unlike alcohol, beer with alcohol, it doesn't dehydrate you because obviously alcohol is a diuretic, which means it increases your urine production. It causes you to lose water and electrolytes. So NA beer hydrates you, but let's be clear, it actually doesn't hydrate you as well as electrolyte drinks. It does have some electrolytes. It has sodium, potassium, less so with magnesium and calcium, but those can be there as well. But in comparison to sports drinks, where you have like a non-alcoholic beer might have maybe 50 milligrams of sodium tops. A sport drinks will have 3 times that. And of course, the potassium aspect of it, it probably has about as much as a sports drink, but something like, 40 milligrams, whereas coconut water can have as much as 600 milligrams. So it's certainly not the best beverage for that, but it can be a useful beverage for that. So generally it gets pretty good marks in terms of hydration. And that is certainly something that it can do and help with. The next question is one of carbohydrates and glycogen replenishment. So non-alcoholic beer contains about, somewhere south of 20 grams of carbs per can. And that, of course, helps to replenish muscle glycogen stores after a workout. Compared to sports drink, though, sports drinks could be as much as double that, 36 grams per 12-ounce can. So it does contribute to that, but it is, less so. An alcoholic beer has carbs. Sports drinks can have double that amount. Now, here's an interesting area that I started to do a little bit of digging into. In a 2012 study in Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, it turns out that runners who drank non-alcoholic beer for 3 weeks before and after the race had less inflammation and fewer respiratory infections. So essentially, this suggests, although let's be clear, this is a very small study and this is just kind of wading into it. There's a lot more research that should be done, but it suggests that non-alcoholic beer can reduce inflammation. And the mechanism by which this works is something called polyphenols. Don't worry, I don't expect you to know exactly what a polyphenol is. Some of you all already know that. Good for you. But it's essentially a type of natural compound that's found in plants, and it acts as an antioxidant and has anti-inflammatory properties. You might know this best from something like tea, right? Drinking tea can be anti-inflammatory. And so polyphenols are in hops and barley, and those are what may offer that anti-inflammatory support, which is very cool and can be really helpful post-workout. So that one is a real plus. But overall, we can see that there's at least 3 different areas that it can support and well, not always as good as other drinks, but very well. One is hydration, one is glycogen replenishment, and the other is in terms of inflammation. But there might be some downsides too. So let's get into that. What you really need in a lot of cases, I'm sure you know, especially if you are somebody who does this a lot. If you're a performance athlete, you already know that you need protein. Any beer doesn't have protein. And that's essential for muscle repair. So certainly if you're drinking non-alcoholic beer post-workout, especially one that requires that sort of support, you're going to need to supplement that in other ways. Nuts, eggs. Well, let's not get started with the price of eggs. Okay. Nuts. I really used to love going to a bar back in the day. Some of you are younger and don't know this existed. But sometimes they would have like a little bowl of nuts that you could eat. And look, the reason bars have this is because they just wanted you to drink more, right? Because it's salty and you would eat these, mixed nuts. And the next thing you know that, you've had 3 or 4 beers. So that's the reason why. But it was actually very charming and very nice to have this little bite while you were enjoying your beer. So hey, that's a great idea. If you are worried about the protein aspect of it, there are ways to have protein-rich snacks along with your non-alcoholic beer that can support that. So as I mentioned, Non-alcoholic beer has lower electrolytes compared to sports drink. What's the solution there? Well, it could be the same thing. It turns out that a bowl of salty mixed nuts would be really, really useful for that, because there you're getting the sodium you need and so forth. So that is one way to do it. Of course, there might be other ways. That's the one that immediately comes to mind. One key thing that you have to be careful of is it turns out that for some people, carbonation can really affect their gastrointestinal system. So you have GI issues, as they say. And, some athletes might experience bloating or discomfort from carbonated drinks. It's not necessarily peculiar to non-alcoholic beers, right? They have carbonation. Beer has carbonation. Soft drinks have carbonation. Even some sports drinks have carbonations too. Even there's sparkling tea now. So any carbonation could do this, but it might not be ideal, especially for endurance events, if this is what you have noticed in the past, or if you're noticing, you try it, you're like, hey, look, I've listened to this guy, Derek, on the Mindful Drinking podcast. I'm going to, check it out. And you run into that kind of experience. I just want you to be aware that that could be part of it. And so you should certainly be careful there. You're listening to the Mindful Drinking podcast. I'm your host, Derek Brown, and we are talking about non-alcoholic beer and whether it's healthy for you, especially in relationship to athletic performance and recovery. So we're going to keep doing it. Essentially, we started talking about some of the pluses, some of the minuses when it comes to the science of non-alcoholic beer for recovery. But now I want to mention something. I want to change course a little bit and talk about the brain. I mentioned in my intro that I feel very satisfied after I have a non-alcoholic beer at the end of the night. And I don't think that's just because it tastes good. It does taste good, by the way. But I think there's more to it. And so I started digging there, and there was a 2013 study and neuropsychopharmacology. By the way, all of the studies are in the comments. So please, if you are curious to explore them, take a look. It's always worthwhile kind of digging into more information. The more information, the better. But in this study, they talked about tasting beer, even without alcohol, can trigger the dopamine release in the brain's reward center. So this is the dopaminergic pathway, if you want to use a fancy term around it, but really it just means our reward center, the things that make us want things, right? So just a little bit of beer, whether or not it has alcohol, can actually, make you more alert, increase the dopamine, and so forth. And this is in relationship to sports drinks, right? So we're comparing here sports drinks to non-alcoholic beers, and we can see that this happens when you have a non-alcoholic beer. This does not happen as much in this study when you have a sports drink. And that's a pretty important thing. Again, small study, requires a lot more research. One note in there that I think is really important is that people with alcohol use disorder, or people with a history in their family of alcohol use disorder, more commonly known as someone with alcoholism, they may have it's a stronger response. That kind of makes sense if somebody's used to this. This is the way that their brain is processed in the past. This is certainly, even without alcohol, they're thinking, oh, wow, here it is. Here's that beer, that first beer. I'm ready. This is priming my brain. So now that I'm going to, want more. So just keep that in mind. We're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of triggers, but I just wanted to mention that. There was another more recent study. It's important sometimes to really look at the most recent information you can get. A brain imaging study that was in the Chemical Senses Journal in 2019, where they essentially did the functional MRI scans. They scan your body, your brain, show that drinking non-alcoholic beer in a beer drinking setting especially activates those pathways, right? So this is confirming the earlier research that I was suggesting, but it really talks about the fact that there might be this ritual and expectation, and that matters just as much as the physical effect, okay? So in other words, any beer can feel satisfying even without the intoxication. I just want to be plain here without getting tipsy, right? So non-alcoholic beer can start that process where where the reward system kicks in, and having that specific ritual and expectation around it can really enhance that. Why does this matter? Right? Why am I bringing this up? And especially in terms of workout and recovery, is because there's a psychological effect in recovery that matters as much as the physical effect. Okay. I want to paint a picture here. You are not a brain without a body. You are not a body without a brain. These things are connected. All right. You know that. You live in your body every day. Sometimes it feels like we're off in la la land in our brain, or sometimes because we have some kind of strong response in our body, whether, pain or some kind of, I don't know, like muscle tightness, whatever we feel in our body, but we are both. And so what affects our brain affects our body. What affects our body affects our brain. And so when you have this very satisfying sort of ritual where after your workout or after a endurance event, you decide you're going to sit down and have a drink with friends, you're going to have, that can be a very powerful aspect of recovery. And so I want to say, this is great, that celebration and relaxation can be really great. You go cycling, you go running, whatever, afterwards, sit down with some friends, have a non-alcoholic beer. It's going to be far better than a beer with alcohol in terms of the way that it supports your health. So even if the physical benefits are limited, the mental benefits are real. Okay, so here's an important caveat. If you are somebody in recovery, now I'm using the word recovery different than athletic performance and recovery. Recovery means somebody who has had alcohol use disorder, and you have a problem with alcohol. Let's say that you don't even identify that. You don't know that for sure. You're just saying, I don't drink because it's kind of a problem for me, whatever problem means to you. Then it is entirely possible, based on this research that I just shared, that having a non-alcoholic beer could be the thing that kicks your brain into, yeah, this is what we want to do. We want to have more beer. We want to have more alcohol. And so I do want to put that out there. If this is something that is of a concern to you, that you should certainly, consult, your physician, therapist, somebody that is a trusted medical or therapeutic expert that can help you work through that problem. Or when in doubt, leave it out. There's water, there's sports drinks, there's chocolate milk. There's plenty of things that you can do to drink for recovery. Maybe that doesn't feel as exciting or as adult, but certainly worth saving your life over, isn't it? So when you're thinking about drinking a non-alcoholic beer, then I think it's important to consider a couple post-workout choices. For endurance athletes, runners, cyclists, triathletes, after long sessions, non-alcoholic beer might be a good choice as a social recovery drink, good for ritual and relaxation with alcohol, without the downsides of alcohol. Great choice. Part of a larger recovery strategy, it can be a good solution, but it is not a standalone solution. Remember that you might consider pairing it with a protein-rich snack. You might consider drinking water first and then having a non-alcoholic beer. You might consider having a bowl of mixed nuts as well. All of this could be part of that ritual, which I think is really cool. There is also, I'm acting like it's just like this uniform non-alcoholic beer. There's one beer, that's it. But it's more than that. There are all these different types. You have stouts, you have wheat beers, and wheat beers are great because those might even have more polyphenols in them, especially if inflammation is something that you're concerned with. And you have, I even had one. It was a really great craft non-alcoholic beer that was a chocolate milk stout. So if you're one of those people who subscribes to drinking chocolate milk after you work out because it has the protein, because of all the various benefits of it, then here you go. There's a chocolate milk stout out there in the world that you can combine the best of both worlds. And I know what you're thinking. Does it taste like chocolate milk? And the answer is, yeah, it tastes exactly what it would taste like if you combine chocolate milk and beer. So either you are repulsed by that or you're intrigued by that, but it is certain something that's interesting. But in general, don't do the thing where you're replacing water with non-alcoholic beer. Water is always best to hydrate with first. And so let me just set up these final takeaways from, is non-alcoholic beer a healthy drink? Yes, it can be. It certainly can be. And it is better for recovery than alcoholic beer. It's just not a magic bullet. The polyphenols can help with inflammation. That's really good. But NA beer is just not going to be, it doesn't have protein. If you're looking for electrolytes and hydration, there may be better sources. Not to say it's a bad source, but there may be better sources. And even without alcohol, beer can trigger a dopamine release. So that ritual does matter, but it does matter if that's something you have experience with and you are worried about being a trigger. So best strategy, of course, is to diversify and have water, protein, carbs, electrolytes, reach that optimal recovery plan. But sometimes maybe just a non-alcoholic beer and a glass of water and some, they keep harping on deluxe mixed nuts, get the really fancy package there, buddy. And you're going to find some really great stuff. So that's all I wanted to share today. That's it for today's episode. And I would love to hear if you've actually tried this. If you've tried non-alcoholic beer after a workout, let me know your thoughts. Do you swear by it? Do you think it's just marketing? And would you choose non-alcoholic beer over a sports drink with chocolate milk? So drop me a message, leave a review, and share this with anyone who's curious about mindful drinking and performance. As always, thank you for joining, and here's to mindful drinking.